The realm just outside the 3D is
Hmm.
beautiful. I mean, there's darkness out there too, don't get me wrong, but there's so much support and love for us that literally all we have to do is ask, like just ask. And that's why, again, having those I call them tower moments or the break apart moments are so valuable, because as we're breaking apart truths, or if we are breaking apart in our ego, there's just all of this availability to us to be filled with
Hmm.
truth, filled with love. And I think that while that can be scary for people, it's also just, I don't know, it's the most life changing. I say, like, go full force in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wealth Within Us. Today I have with me Nicole Miles, and she is not only the author of her new book, Eloveate, but she is also a soul coach. And hopefully today she can not only share her own soul journey, but help us get on our own soul path. So thank you so much, Nicole, for sitting here with me and having a conversation. So how did Eloveate start? And I guess that also, how did you start the eLOVEate process?
Hey, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love
Absolutely.
talking about anything that has to do with the ascension process and
Mhm.
all of us just elevating, which is kind of the same as ascension, elevating together. So the word elevate came to me one day. Just I happen to have a pretty open channel to be able to receive things. And so one day I was just doodling as I was waiting for a friend who was running a little bit late for lunch. And I was just doodling and it came through Elevation Nation. And I was like, wow, that's got kind of a fun ring to it. And so I
Mm.
sat with it a few minutes and I was doodling. And if you look at the logo on my Elevation Nation website and products and stuff, it's an ocean, a mountain, and then like a radiating sun that's
Mm.
actually in the shape of a heart. And so I was kind of doodling that. And then I saw dive deep, vibe high, and radiate love. And it like all just came, like it just like formed itself on a piece of paper. And I was like, well, that's pretty.
Yeah.
And then I went to lunch and I let it alone. I was like, whatever, that was fun. And I went into lunch with my friend. And then just gradually over time, I started to understand what it meant. And I
Mhm.
started to see how there was like a process ingrained in those words, the dive deep, the vibe high, the radiate love, that it's like a formula. And then continuing on that, one day I was flying home from a vacation, and I was super emotional, like cracked wide open kind of thing, because in my opinion, when we crack wide open is when God has the most, the most open space to come in and fill us with things that are greater.
And we're
And
more opening to listening too.
totally, because you're on your knees, you're like
Yeah,
asking,
you're like, please help me.
please help me.
I'm lost.
Help me, I'm dying, right? And
Yeah,
so
I've had it. I've had it. The straw that broke the camel's back has come to pass.
I have it a lot still. I mean, like,
Me
the
too.
journey is not like one wake up and then you're good. It's
Mhm.
like a process of like pulling off the layers. And so the chapters of this book came to me during that time, and I didn't even know what they were. I just kept hearing these things. And so I would type them into my phone. And then after I got done hearing about 8 or 10 of them, I was like, whoa, that's like the bones or like the skeleton of a book, kind of. And
Yeah.
I came home from that trip and I would just sit and fill it in as I felt like it was time to. I didn't try to fill it in. I would just open myself up. And if anything came through, I would type it up. So it just, again, was something that was given to me. And as I looked back on it, I was like, wow, this was the mother figure that I never got to have. It was like this divine mother coming and talking to me about who I really am, who
Uh,
we really are in our
uh,
hearts, like God sees us, how the divine mother sees
yeah.
us.
Almost
And
like the teacher that we all wish we had that we really just haven't yet.
exactly. And again, like that motherly loving,
Mm.
like so much love. And I've had these experiences before too. I had amazing experiences with angels and what maybe somebody might call the Holy Spirit. I think everyone has different names for
Mhm.
different things, but this divine love that like wraps around us and feels so amazing that it's not human, and you didn't make it up on your own, because there's no way that I could come up with something that huge and massive. Um, but so it's that sense of like someone coming in and giving you a hug and being like, this is what you truly are made of, this is truly why we're here, like this is what you're supposed to be doing in your life. And that's the dive deep part, vibe high, radiate love, that I was taught, and realized I had been doing that work the whole time, but I didn't have those words to
Mm.
assign to the process. But that's literally what I'd been doing for 20 some years on this awakening journey, was diving deep into truths of things, right? Diving deep into the shadow parts of myself, diving deep into the lies that we're told about so many things and how inverted the world is, just extricating all those things, subtracting,
Yeah.
diving into all of it and finding the roots of why things happen and why are we wired a certain way, like going back to the original wounds of how we get these beliefs about ourselves or the beliefs about the world. Where did that come from? Like, where did that get planted in the first place? And now as an adult, being able to look back on those things and say that that wasn't even true, but I believed it because I was little or because my mom said
Yeah.
so. Is the mom or, so
People
dive deep,
that you thought you trusted.
right? Because you had to trust them, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're the ones that feed you and give you a home and take care of you. And they're the authorities in your life,
And the
um,
people that you're mostly exposed to.
yeah, and you love. That's all you know at that time in your life are the people that are your caretakers and
Yeah. And
risk
most
it.
of them are just passing down the same thing because as you were talking, I'm thinking, I think it's very generational. It didn't, when you're looking for the root, I think you just can't look at the now. And you can't even look at 100 years ago because I feel it goes back so much, so much further back than that. And I do like watching a lot of the ancient civilizations and all those types of things where they really explore, well, where was it? Was it really a genetic manipulation way back? Was there really a worship gene placed inside of us? And all of those things.
Yeah. I've had so many personal experiences. And I've done this with clients too, in healing energy work, and like coaching work, where we go back really far and we see like different lifetimes, and whether you call them past lives or just alternate lives and an alternate reality or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah, the multidimensional kind of thing, because
right, like we're like a bazillion layers all over the place,
I
right?
know.
Multidimensional beings. But going back and realizing, and there's such a relief in it, like realizing, wow, like I'm not that way because I'm not okay. It's because like literally this is something that I came here
Mm-hmm.
to to dig into and to heal. And it makes you feel
Yeah.
very, like, I call it divinely empowered, not like empowered, like I'm empowered, but like divinely
No,
empowered.
I do know what you mean. And I think that most of us feel that if our life isn't going the wrong way, that it's us, like we're broken in some way. Oh, it must have been this thing that I did. Or even if you blame the programming that you had, it's like it kind of is a relief of, "Ugh, well, I know that it's not just this one thing." And it kind of does almost give that, people talk about the oneness of everybody. Like we've kind of all, no matter where we come from, this has affected us all for such a long time. And we've just all been born into it. So it is almost a relief to say, okay, well, now I can work on this because now I know it's not me, Michelle, and this body that I came into at this time right now.
Yeah, it's like beyond this ego.
Yes.
This like collective
Mhm.
situation, and this like, oh, it's because I'm a human. Actually, it's this human experience that was, where this came from, not necessarily a Nicole experience always. And
Mhm.
I think it made me feel really good. I think it makes clients feel good too, to know that, like, hey, by you doing this work, taking that deep dive and doing this work, you healed that for yourself and everybody who's
Yeah.
entangled in the situation. Like, you just released a bond and cords that were keeping everybody bound to this concept or idea or this wound. And now by you having the courage to go in and dive into that situation and to heal it with love, you just dissolved so much for so many people. And it makes the healing path feel like it's kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of worth that horrible feeling that you get
Yeah.
right through that part. Like the suffering that happens is actually for a reason. There's
Yeah.
value in it in a way.
Not only
And
am
I
I
think,
going to benefit, but so many other good people are going to benefit from my story, my experience, because then they're in turn going to have their story, their experience, and then that gets shared and shared and shared. And as we know, that's how things. I think most things, when you uncover the truth, there's somewhere buried in a story of symbolism, and maybe it's not the interpretation that we have of it, but it's all buried in there somewhere.
yeah, it's a very deep experience. And I think just being willing to acknowledge that our human experience
Mm.
is way deeper and way grander than what a lot of society is willing to experience. And I don't know if you experience this or not, but once you wake up and you start experiencing all these things, there's this very awkward scenario that happens where it's hard to then connect with
Yes.
things that maybe you were connected to in the past, the people, the jobs, the roles, the identities, and all that stuff. And that can be very isolating, like very, very lonely to be like, well, I no longer can really relate to that and feel like that's real. But then I also don't know what is. So like, where am I? And so I love your podcast for that reason, because it gives people a place to come and hear and feel affirmed about like, oh yeah, I feel that way too, or I feel the truth in that, and
Aw.
because it can be a lonely path, you know?
It really can. And I think you and I woke up a lot earlier to a certain level. I would say I woke up in my 20s and I knew things were off. And for me, 9/11 was my more bigger awakening because I questioned so much about that and you realize so much. And then in my early 30s, I healed myself from PCOS through energy work and meditation alone. So that was a big awakening. But I find I go in these little spurts, but now I feel like we're on such a trajectory that those spurts aren't even happening more. That now it's just like go time. And I think since 2020, the amount of people that are awakening is so much greater. And there's so many more outlets for people to talk to. Because I would literally be in groups or even around my own family. And there'd be certain things I wouldn't say because because I was the conspiracy theorist. I was like the woo-woo. It's like this weird combination of spiritual and conspiracy.
Yeah, too.
And you had to watch.
I'm still the weird one.
Yeah, well, I am too, but that's okay. But it's becoming so much less weird. Like my sister's so open to all this stuff now, whereas she used to think that I was kind of like she's a little off.
Yeah. Yeah. You're in our community, but I still think like even when I'm going through it sometimes, and I still go through like, and that's the weird thing too, is when people talk about like, oh, they're awakening. People are awakening or they're waking up. It's like, oh, because when we wake up one time in the morning and then we're awake all day. But it's almost like you wake up and then you wake up again and you wake up again and you wake up again. And sometimes like I remember being in some of those phases and I'd be like, is it ever going to end? Like, am I ever just going to be at peace?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And things are moving so fast now. And the channels or the information is so out there that you can almost search anything to find somebody talking about something. So even each little bit of that unfolds something new that you didn't know. And one of the things I love about having people like you on and everybody else is that, oh, that's something I didn't know. And now that unlocks a whole new layer that you're like, oh, I didn't see that before. Oh my gosh, it was right in front of my eyes. How did I not see this truth? And it's like, oh, it's literally awakening moment by moment by moment. So it's not like you said, it's not just like this one whole thing. Oh, we're all awake. It's like, no, it's definitely an unfolding and it's always happening on little things and big things.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that. I mean, social media can, like any tool, it can be harmful or it could be fantastic. So it's like having a knife in your hand. You're either going to peel your apple or you're going to murder someone. Like, how are you going to use the tool? And the nice thing about social media when it comes to this topic is that you can do your research privately and not, you don't have to go to the library and sit there and go through the card catalog like we used to. Everything is right all the time. And anything you want to know, there's some source there that you can connect to. So that's a beautiful part of where we're at right now. So that's eLOVEate came to me. The book came to me when I was kind of in one of those tower moments, the fall apart moments. And the formula had been with me that whole time. The formula is that dive deep that we just talked about. And then vibe high is a lot of the truths, things that I started to discover too about, what's in our water, what's in our food, how are we growing all that stuff? Again, part of the awakening process, but vibing high is how do you really truly take care of yourself in a way that is internally wise, like not what's being told to you from outside, but what is right for you to make you feel in the highest vibration, like your highest best self. What do you need to do to yourself or with yourself every single day? And in those times when you're feeling really low, how do you nourish yourself? And, especially like with what you offer, the energy of that, like the dynamics of that healing is just so, for anybody who's not awake, they'd be like, what are you doing? You put stickers? What? They wouldn't, but once you're awake and you start to understand energy dynamics and like what all that stuff means. Oh, okay. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
it's totally different. So what helps you to vibe high? And then radiate love is just the result of what happens when we do this work, when we're committed to this path of taking care of ourselves and the vibe high part, but also diving deep. It changes the way that we interact with each other. It changes the way that we feel and see ourselves. So instead of continuing the process of maybe, self-doubt or belittling ourselves or taking things out on our partner or criticizing our boss at work, or everything's out there, like all the badness is happening out there, we start to heal the things inside of us. And then we're no longer looking to just dump it on someone else. So we become more of a beacon of love. We become more whole inside of ourselves. And that radiates out to the people around us, and they start to see the difference. And anybody who does this work know that there's difference. There's definitely a before and after once you've hit that. Yeah.
I love the way you just said that. Instead of dumping it all out on everybody else, which is what so much of us do. I mean, I would be lying if I said I haven't done it in the past, but instead of dumping it out, it's like going inside and saying like, well, what is it within me that not only is triggering this action, but is triggering this event to even be happening to me? Am I explaining that correctly? So it's like you're examining yourself in the process, and you're not just like dumping it out on everybody else and taking personal responsibility. Because I feel, and you probably do too, and I do mention this a lot, part of being free and gaining freedom and personal freedom is accepting responsibility for your own actions. Part of it.
Yeah, I think I say that in one of my chapters, don't I? It's like when you realize that you are the magician. I forget how I said it. It was so long. Oh, gosh. It's like once you realize that you have been creating your own world, it's both like sobering because you're like, ooh, I've been creating my own world. But it's also empowering, right? And it's also freeing where you're like, okay, so now I can like know thyself, go within, do the work. Because pretty much the stuff that happens outside of us that is triggering is always guiding us toward healing. So take the time to go inside and figure out like, why did that trigger me? What are the parts of me? What is that emotion? Where does it live in my body? How do I take care of that emotion so that I can actually get to the healing instead of the blaming, the healing instead of the confrontation and conflict? Like, let's get to the love of the situation instead of getting to the separation. And I talk about like union a lot in my book too. Even like the word yoga means union, it means to yoke. And so, our whole process is really coming back together. Like that's what healing is, right? It's taking fragments and bringing them back together to make them whole. Look how the light's shining on my hands as I say that. Isn't that divine?
No, I came right in there. Oh my gosh.
So uniting ourselves.
What's the truth right there?
Yeah, bringing us back to union within ourselves, making ourselves whole, but then also union with spirit, like union with the divine, connecting the earth to the heavens, like bringing it all together so that we can change this reality and shift it to a higher vibrational consciousness. Because truly, isn't that what we all want? Like, don't we all want to live in a better world where every person is free and every person is living from their heart space and not from this egoic greed thing that we've been doing for too many thousands of years?
Yes, this lack and scarcity and the not enough and all the other stuff too. One of the things that I really loved about your book was how you talked about the masculine and the feminine, and how like we're here to experience both of those, but ultimately it's how to combine those in union in together, which I hadn't really thought about that way before. I mean, I know that we live in a world of duality and, there's a lot that goes with that. But I love how you talk about combining the two together to truly be whole.
Yeah. So that's, if you think about the symbol of the yin and the yang, that's what that means. It's the feminine and the masculine together, and there's some of one and the other. So there creates a balance. And you can picture like the yin and yang symbol, like spinning. So, but it's also what the actual ancient practice of Tantra was about. So Tantra, everyone thinks about it as like this funky sexual thing that people practice, but it's really not. It's really about uniting the masculine and feminine energies in our body and coming into a place of wholeness and oneness. And then ultimately still being polarized in one direction or the other, because otherwise we're all going to as these, like we tend to a certain thing. We either tend to our masculine side or we tend to our feminine side, depending how we are. Which is also then what makes us connected to another person. It's like how we get into a relationship and feel attracted, like a battery, the negative polarity to the positive. But within us, like when you think about the divine masculine and the divine feminine inside of us, those are the divine. So there's the divine iteration of each side, and then there's the more egoic side of each one too. And so I think it's more like it's balancing both of them and bringing them into union, but it's also clearing and healing each side too. So when you think about like the masculine energy, you can picture what that would be if it is in like a corrupt state. A corrupted masculine is like overbearing and my way or the highway and very egoic and super action oriented, where they can never calm down, never. So bringing that in itself into balance so that it can be a strong, steady force.
Yeah. And in service to all, not just the few.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's the philosophy that there is more than enough for everyone, not the I need my piece and I need it so that no one else can have it.
At the expense of anybody else.
Exactly. Yes. At the expense of humanity, at the expense of the earth, at the expense of, I mean, really everything.
Yeah. It's essentially like taking life force away when really the masculine is about giving life force. If you even think about like the male anatomy, like it's about giving life, it's not taking life force.
And so if you think about it, to a certain extent, those institutions have grown because we unknowingly have given that power away.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's also been programming that has caused us to believe that we should give that away.
And I think that's part of the awakening. Part of the awakening is waking up to that, oh, that's not my thought. That's not even a true thought. Like, where did that come from? And that in and of itself, just recognizing some of those things is like, it takes a lot of critical thinking and thinking in general, because sometimes we're so distracted with our phone and all these other, I mean, just drive down the road and you got a million billboards and signs and it's like so overstimulating. But even just going in for a short amount of time on some kind of a regular basis, you begin to much more quickly see through those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's like bringing them into their own balance, like a masculine energy that's not in its extreme, like it's not in its like nasty version, it's in its pure version, if you will. And then the same thing with the feminine energies inside of us. And then weaving those together. Like here's an example, just so that we're not so so philosophical, like an actual hands-on experience. I happen to just be very much in my feminine mostly. Like I am very creative. I am very like heart-centered. I'm very much like I just love on everybody and make sure everyone's nurtured and all that stuff. But I also then, when I sit down to do things, I don't inherently have a strong masculine side that is very directive about accomplishing tasks in an orderly way, because I'm very like creative and fluid and like just kind of responsive to, oh, that came up, I should deal with that. Or, oh, I forgot I need to work on that. And my mind can be in a trillion different directions. My hands are going in a trillion different directions because I have this.
Many of us can relate.
This creative desire to like, I just want to like create and be in it and feel. But I need to balance my masculine side, because if I'm in that all the time, a whole day can pass and I've accomplished like nothing that needed to actually get accomplished.
Or so little bits of something, but finished nothing.
Correct.
I often find myself there.
2 days a week, at least, probably.
Right.
Within myself, knowing that I have to balance like that discipline, that boundary. I like to think about it even in terms of like the masculine being a cup, like a vessel, like a glass. And then the feminine being the water inside of a glass. If you don't have the glass, the water's just everywhere, right? It's vapor. It's like water vapor in the air, a cloud. But once you contain it into the boundaries of that masculine, that gives it some structure and shape and form. Oh, now it's something that we can actually be nourished with. Actually drink the water because it's actually in a glass. And so giving form to my day has been something that I've really had to work on in terms of even like checklists, which I can't stand. I don't like checklists, but they work. And scheduling. I used to be like, I know I have something today. I have something, I better check. Now I'm structured about like, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to fit in time to walk the dog. And this is what I'm going to have to, I have to balance my masculine and feminine in that way. And so just
I would agree. Now, how does the Kundalini energy fit in with that? Is that similar to the like where does that fit in? Because I'm not sure if you mentioned it in your book or not, but that was one of the questions that I had that came up. I'm like, well, what about the Kundalini energy? Where does that fit into things?
So Kundalini energy, Kundalini is like it's considered the serpent energy that's
Mhm.
resting at the base of our spine. And as we awaken and come into our spirituality, that energy starts to rise. And it is, even in Ayurveda, there's like the two, what are they called? It's the Ida and the Pingala, I think is what it
Mhm.
is. Bodies that go up. And so they cross over at our chakras, right? But even if you think about like the left side and the right side crossing over each other, it's like there's a
Yeah, the
spot.
masculine and the feminine. So it's still a play on that.
Yeah. So think about like rising the energy, no matter if you're calling it Kundalini or not, but rising the energy up through your chakras in a way that the masculine and feminine are crossing over each other and weaving and dancing together and being in harmony and balance and flow. And you do that, I mean, through, I would consider years of practice of purification, breath work, energy work, and visualizations. There's so many ways to work on Kundalini. Some people have instant Kundalini awakenings, and they almost go crazy because the amount of energy shooting up their spine to their third eye is like insane.
Yeah.
I think it's related. I think that if you do want to go down the tantric path, there's a lot to learn in that sense when it comes to even how to be with a partner in a sexual union and use the energy of that sexual experience to raise your own energy and your own consciousness. And so
And
through,
heal.
pardon?
And for healing.
Oh yeah, heal. And I mean, some people say manifest, if you take
Hmm.
that same energy, that it is creation energy. It's the same energy that you might be about to make a baby with it, but if you learn how to take that energy and turn it into a manifestation that's not a human, but a different type of manifestation, you can use that same forceful energy of two, when two or more are gathered, magical
Yeah.
things happen.
Kind of like birthing a book or a business or
Yeah,
whatever it is that you're working on or
peace on earth.
whatever.
Yeah, peace on earth. So Kundalini is definitely a
Yeah,
part of
that too. Peace on earth. That's a good one.
Kundalini is a part of it. I would say that I would say to anybody who's interested in Kundalini stuff to really work on researching it and seeing how it relates to you personally. There's a lot
Okay.
of teachings out there that go all different directions, and I don't profess to be an expert on it, so I don't want to put ideas in that aren't perfected in somebody else's
Yeah.
mind.
Well, and I
Yeah,
think that like anything else, do the research and see what resonates with you. And I always,
yeah,
even with myself, I do the research and I take what resonates with me and I leave the rest behind.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes that's because it's not worthy. It's not worth it to you right now, and sometimes it's just because you're not ready for it, and
Yeah.
then it catches up to you 6 months or 9 months later. And, oh, now I understand that part.
Yeah. Now that's clicking. Before I didn't get it. Now
Yeah.
I get it. And that's all part of the sort of unfolding, like you said, like we were talking about earlier. It doesn't always happen all at once, nor could it, because as you just mentioned with that Kundalini experience that people have all at once, it's way too much on our energetic systems. We are these dense bodies and we can only handle so much internally. And you just don't want that pot to boil over and you go with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's like devastating. Even as it is, the awakening journey is hard enough, like it's
Mhm.
definitely falling apart, building back up, it's enough of that back and forth. If that all happened at once, it would be destructive to the point
Yeah.
where people might not be able to pull themselves back together. So same thing with the Kundalini energy. I think it's wiser to delve into that different topic on a personal note and see what resonates the most.
Yeah. And I think to keep in mind that, and it's weird because the last like 2 months, I kind of had my own little breakdown or whatever you want to call it. But I'm like, wait, I'm doing all these things and looking at the results and they're not there. And this is all crap. So I would also add that during this awakening process, sometimes we do have these moments of doubt. They quickly fade, but don't beat yourself up about them because it can be sometimes not the easiest process, but just keep going. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on that. So,
Yeah. And I'm only saying it because I literally just experienced it within the last month or two. And it was really, I really sat down and questioned, like, why am I even doing all of this? Why am I sitting here meditating every day? why am I doing all these emotional release things? Why am I delving into all of this stuff? Because my outer world does not seem to have changed. In fact, it seems to have gotten crappier.
I love you said that though. That's like the absolute magic. Like what you just said is key. The outside world is pretty much, let's be honest, it's not going to just turn into like rainbows, right? It's not going to just
overnight.
Outside world is set up, let's be honest. And as you like delve into these rabbit holes, you see how jacked up the world really is, the people in charge and what's been going on. So the work is not so that you feel amazing necessarily, or that you actually change the outside world tremendously. The work is so that you don't get dragged down by that outside world. The work is so that you can stay whole and centered. And the work is always inside of us. So the outside world is a reflection of what's inside, but sometimes that outside world is just there because the collective consciousness has built that world so strongly. One person awakening is not going to change all of that, right? I mean, a bunch of us awakening will definitely change it, but you're still
3% is critical mass, and then 30% to actually create lasting change. I think that's what I've read.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. But what
I was going to say, not as much as you would think.
No, but that's because the power of love. I mean, and that's like why it's inside of eLOVEate. But love, the power of love, and I mean that's been studied by like the Heart Math Institute. The power of the heart and love, it is by far the most pure form of. It is like pure energy. It is pure like Kundalini energy, exactly, like life force energy. So the more of us that can harness that and live in that, that's why it's only 3%. It doesn't take as many people to hold that compared to the people who are holding that lack consciousness and that fear consciousness, being asleep. But the things that you were working on, and I had a really bad December and January, and by bad, I mean a lot of challenges, like a lot. And I've done this work, Michelle, for like 24 years. So I think egoically, you get to a point where you're like, really? There's more?
No. And you know what? It's funny because I don't know what was going on. And we're talking about January 23 into December 23 into January 24. And I've spoken to other people in the spiritual community, and it seems like it was a common theme. A lot of people seem to struggle between like the whole holidays. Like I would say Thanksgiving into the new year. And I feel even myself, I'm finally breaking out of it. So that's interesting.
Me too. It was like a lot of stuff coming at me. But when that happens, so two things. One, you're doing the work for yourself. You're doing your work so that you can stay here, right? Like you can be the steadiness in the chaos that's around you. Because that's kind of the goal. It's like you might not be able to stop the world from spinning out of control, but you can control how you relate to that spinning world. And you can be a place of serenity and contentment within yourself, no matter what's going on. And that's why we do the work. We do the work so we can be that. But also, when I was doing this crazy month and a half of like purging is what I would call it, every once in a while I would stop and say, I wouldn't get these lessons unless God really felt like I could handle it. And so at this point, I kind of look at those things and say, this is crap. I'm not dying to go through it. But I've done it so long and so many times that I know the value of it. And I know that there is gold in it. I know that when I go into it and I extract out the lessons, I am going to feel lighter. I'm going to be more whole, and I'm going to be closer to my heaven on earth. Whether or not the outside is heaven on earth or not, I'm closer to my heaven on earth by having gone through it. And so that's like the carrot that I hold for myself at the end, where I'm like,
no, I love that. It's such a positive perspective where sometimes when we're going through those things, we can kind of get a little down. And I have to say, I got myself down a little further than I normally go. And I'm usually a pretty positive purpose or person.
It's interesting because when I teach this stuff, I'm like, oh, vibe high. Like, how do you keep your vibration high? I'm like, I'm doing that stuff. And I'm still feeling like dirt, but that's because I do think as we grow and we become a stronger vessel, we're able to endure harder things. And that's just kind of, it's like, if you think about yourself going through, being a toddler to a preschooler to a high schooler to a, maybe like at your doctorate level, the work gets harder because you're more capable. And when the work gets harder, we get more refined. We become better. We become more crystallized, more clear is what's happening to us. So it's worth sticking it out.
Yeah.
Like, if no
Yeah.
other message comes through today, it's worth sticking it out, because when you get that low sometimes, I mean, I had moments where I was like, dude, check me out already. And at the
Yeah.
holidays, when you're supposed to be like jolly and stuff, and things are happening, or
Mhm.
you're triggered, or you're starting to feel depressed, like pressed down and heavy and burdened, that's hard. It's like, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way right now. It's a time of like love and togetherness and pleasantry. And I feel like I just want to exit. Like, where's the door? Get me out.
Peace out, Michelle. Zip this body off. I'm out of here.
But stay. Just stay. Because usually when you're feeling that junky, it's like that analogy of like you have to hit rock bottom before you bounce back up. So I do tell myself to like, don't quit before the miracle. This is like the low point before the trajectory starts to bounce me back up into freedom. And you just have to know
Yeah.
that. You have to know that it's just how the process feels. You're obviously strong enough, or you wouldn't have this lesson. You must be ready. Everything for its own purpose. So I just try to talk myself through it.
And don't be
Yeah.
surprised when those moment comes. I think is another good thing, because as you said, we're all sort of doing this work and we're moving forward. And then when something happens, you're like, man, I'm doing all this stuff. So sometimes I have to be easy on myself to say, okay, it's just what do they call it? Say new level, new devil, something like that. So when they show up, don't be so hard on yourself that you're not doing the work, or you're not doing it good enough or right, or all these other things that you're like, why did this happen? So, and I tend to be I overanalyze everything. I intellectualize everything. So my mind goes crazy during these times.
Get back to your heart. That's usually the answer. Usually when we start to feel that way, it's because we've spun up into the mind, and the mind is where the ego lives, where all the duality is. The heart is where you have to get back into. And that's also why I think like even my book, like that divine mother love,
Mm,
sometimes like picking up the book and like reading a page or two of it, you start to sink back into the I am loved, I am cared for, the universe is taking care of me,
yes.
it's part of a plan. Like you start to feel not so alone and not so
Yeah,
upheaval or analyzing, because that can get really messy, you
it
know?
really can. And you can really get some, I hate to say the word, but like some crazy in there. You're like, where did those thoughts even come from? And
Yeah.
sometimes we have to realize that those aren't our true soul's thoughts. Those are external programmed thoughts.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. And I think too, when you think about like the mind and the heart, you can think about
Mhm.
that sort of in the same way as like what we were talking about, the masculine and the feminine. Is like there has to be balance there. If you're too far in your head and you're too far out of your heart, which is what collectively we've been for a long time.
Yeah.
If you're all head and no heart, that's out of balance. If you're all heart and no head, that's out of balance. So where can you find a nice flow in between the two? Like, am I over analyzing this? Let's get back into my heart. Or if you're
Mhm.
too emotional, you can't just walk around crying all day and being sappy and sad. You got to say, okay, what are some logical things I can do? I can wash the dishes, do the laundry, make the beds. I don't know, something to get me out of this
Yeah.
funkiness of. So balance, balance, balance.
Yeah.
Really,
Almost
it's
like
just,
let me get into a meditative task where I'm
Mhm.
doing these things and my mind is redirected so I can refocus and reshift.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. We're given these vessels, right? These bodies with absolutely no instructions, and usually the instruction book you get is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Wherever that
Yeah.
missing manual is, let's find that.
Yeah, they're usually wrong. And so like finding all of those truths inside of us, like, the treasure is hidden within our own selves, and the truths are hidden within our own selves too. So it's a process of learning how to go inside, like peeling off those layers of lies and distractions and craziness to get to the heart of who we are. I mean,
Yeah.
we even say that, the heart of who we are. We don't say the mind of who we are, right?
Yeah, what our heart is our second brain, right? We call the heart the second brain. Is that correct?
I would say the gut is the second brain. I
Second
think the
brain,
heart is its own special thing. I think the heart is its own special,
its
like,
own special thing.
generator of
Yeah.
energy. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the key too is to think like there is no manual, because the manual for me isn't the same as the manual for you. So the only way to figure those things out is really to sit and go inside, because what's right for me may not be right for you or someone else watching this. And I think the important part is to just go inside and figure out, well, what is it that my purpose is? Because my purpose isn't necessarily your purpose. They may be aligned, but I have different challenges to overcome. I have different programming. I have different things I came into this vessel with that are all on my journey to discover and uncover. And I love that, you could just go on YouTube or a podcast or something and, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. Let me hear some positive, uplifting things to sort of help me along my journey. And these are becoming more and more accessible to people, and more people are also looking for them.
Yeah.
And like your book.
I love too that you say like it's so individualistic. And this is something that I have always struggled with because I taught yoga for a long time. I taught elementary school. That was like what I went to college for, to be a teacher. I taught elementary school, had my own kids, and then I would teach yoga. And when I would teach a yoga class, I would teach like, this what I call the middle line, where like you're going through the basics of like, with the poses. But I'm also so intuitive that like I would be tuned into different people and what they needed. And if I had more than 6 people in a class, it would start to cause anxiety for me because I needed to cue different people different ways and adjust them and help them, but it was almost too much. And so then when it comes to like the healing path, and even like you're talking about searching for answers, it is so individualistic that it's really important, I think, to find the people in your community, because you can find people online who are giving you information, but I think it's important too to find the people in your community who have the hands-on help for you, who you can actually go and like I do coaching for people, so you can come to me and say like, this is what I'm going through, and we'll sit, and it's your energy that we're going into, and we're working on what's going on with you. How are we healing you? Not, what am I searching for on YouTube that might fit me? Because sometimes that can be like a rat race too, where you might fall into the wrong things. I think
and more general too, I would say.
Yeah. And I mean, you can tweak it down. I think I think that it's definitely a personal journey, but I think it's important to have people with whom you can speak candidly about the deep darkness in your life. And I don't know that people always have that. So I think sometimes they are listening to all these different things on YouTube or podcasts or reading books and trying to like piece it together themselves. And sometimes that can be a struggle, which is fine if you're okay with that. But don't be afraid then to go the extra mile and say, I think I need to find somebody who can help me sort through this stuff too. Because you need that reflection sometimes of another person.
I agree. And I don't only think that, I also believe that there's only so far that we are willing to go ourselves. And when you work with someone else like yourself, they're going to bring you to the deep places that you're a little bit more scared to go into. So while we are all on our own healing journey, I do firmly believe that we can only at this point in time go so far. And we need that outside voice, that outside who can see what you're not seeing, who can bring up what you're not willing to bring up. Because when we're left to our own devices, you're like, I'll put that trauma aside for later. And you may be doing it subconsciously. But I've always found that in talking and working with other people, they're going to dig up the deep stuff. And I think that the deep healing can happen a lot quicker when you work with someone else, and a lot deeper. Not only quicker, but the healing is a lot deeper when you work with someone else.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. So when I work with somebody, whether it's coaching or like an energy healing session on the table, again, I'm open to things. So I'll hear things that I'm supposed to say to the person. And sometimes they look at me and they're like, how'd you know that? And I'm like, sorry. I'm here to ask you that And they're like, they have no choice but to accept it, because while it's coming from my voice, it's not that I came up with it. And so it's almost like an immediate download, immediate, like, what would be the word? It's like I forget the word. I can't think of it right now. It's like injected.
Intravenous.
It's sort of like that. It's just directly pushed into the person where they don't even have to like think it. It just goes into them. So they get to there's no like analyzation. There's no ego allowed. It's allowed to bypass the ego and go into them as truth. And that moment is like magical healing, because the mind didn't have to wrestle with anything. It just went in and it changed everything.
Yeah.
And so there is value in that for sure. I've had so many, I could sit here and spend hours telling you experiences that I've had on the table or with my coach or the people I go to for healing work. Amazing, magical experiences that
I agree.
They don't come from the head, the mind. You can't conceive of them until you're in it. And that helps us to know that there truly is a divine love that is so in favor of us and so supportive of our healing and our love and our joy that like it just changes the way you look at life. It's an awakening in its own to know that we're that loved. And
And I think and I think when you're in those spaces, you've already opened yourself up. If you're on a table receiving energy work or even giving energy work, you've already opened yourself up to that. And I just know in my own personal journey, when I've sought to other people, you're already open because you've made the choice to be there. So just making the choice to be there, you're going to be so much open. And even with my own journey back in my early 30s, when I first got really involved with energy work, it was not myself that got the deep healing, but it was the combination of myself doing my own work and inviting these other people and working with other people to get there too.
Yeah. Yeah. The realm just outside the 3D is beautiful. I mean, there's darkness out there too, don't get me wrong, but there's so much support and love for us that literally all we have to do is ask, like just ask. And that's why, again, having those I call them tower moments or the break apart moments are so valuable, because as we're breaking apart truths, or if we are breaking apart in our ego, there's just all of this availability to us to be filled with truth, filled with love. And I think that while that can be scary for people, it's also just, I don't know, it's the most life-changing. I say like go full force in, like say, just say yes. Like I promise you're not going to regret it. There are hard parts, but you're not going to regret it because it's life-changing.
And know that you're safe. I think that's the other thing that sometimes people feel is that, oh, if I tiptoe into this, now I'm putting myself in an unsafe space because it's unknown. So therefore, and most people find the unknown is also unsafe.
And talk about like how, they've jacked up our idea of all of this. As we're growing up and going to the movie theater, we're watching like Freddy Krueger when we're little. All the weird spiritual stuff is what they show on movie screens and TV shows. And demonic stuff that's programmed into everything. So what people are shown is if you leave this tangible 3D world, it's spooky. It's not. Like, I mean, it can be, I guess, if that's where you're going to put your intention. But when you leave this 3D world, it's magical. It is divine. It is beauty in all possible ways. So we've been programmed to, I think, not look that far. Like, don't go there. Don't play with that. That's
and we've been programmed that for a reason too. I think. I mean, there's programming for a reason, because people throw the word freedom around, but do you think that the elite people in this world really want you to have freedom? Like, no, they do not want the things that we are all seeking. So
anybody who's free, right? And I wrote about that in my book too. Anybody who's free, you can't sell anything to people who are free. Yeah. If I'm free and sovereign inside myself, then I'm not out there searching for alcohol, drugs, movies, sports, sex, porn, that stuff. Like, I don't care for that because I have everything I need inside of me. You can't sell to that. So no one's going to make money off of it. No one can have power over me like that.
And when they try, you see through it. You see the truth through it. And I think one of the bigger parts of awakening that some people don't even realize, because it just happens naturally, is you do end up with a much more critical eye and ear, and you can see through the things. Like sometimes I'll hear things I usually watch independent news, but even sometimes on that, you're like, that doesn't make so much sense. And you can much more easily see through the crap and find the truth, or not even necessarily find the truth, because sometimes the truth is so buried, but you can look at the layers and say, yeah, that's not right. That's not right. And it comes so much more easily. And that back to in the beginning, we talked about empowering. Knowing and looking at the world with a critical lens, there's nothing more empowering than that. Because now, as you just said, you own your own freedom and you decide. You can't be sold to.
Yeah. It's manipulation and control. So if you say no to manipulation and control, then you become free.
Yeah.
It's hard to exit that matrix, but it
really is. Because it's so ingrained in us. I mean, from the time that we were probably even in the womb, because even when you're in the womb, it's still around you. It's around your mother. and whoever is around there telling, oh, do this, do that. I mean, I think you and I were born around the same time frame. I was born in the early 70s, and women didn't breastfeed at that time. It was like, oh, you can't do that. And look at how many people bought into that. And most babies at that time were not breastfed for whatever reasons that they were pushing, that it wasn't. When you think about it now, you're like, oh my God, that's so bizarre. How could why would our body do that if it wasn't the best thing for us? I mean, I find most things, if you just break off the top layer and you ask one question, like the whole deck of cards comes crumbling down. But most people don't even ask the initial question.
Yeah. And you know what I want to say about that too? Because sometimes I think when we talk about that, there's this little imperceptible almost thread of shame on you for not.
Yeah.
That, because I feel like our society has been set up in a way where we are, and you said this before, we are so distracted on purpose that nobody has time or energy at the end of their day, generally, dives into some of these things and to find truths about stuff. They're just so stinking beat down that they shrug. They watch the news as they're making their dinner and they're like, oh, really? Oh, that's, look at that. We're another whole country's freezing right now. Oh, look, Maui got set on fire. And they don't even go another step because they're freaking exhausted. They're fried.
Yeah.
They've taken care of too many things. And that whole thing, the way that, and we could go down this forever, Michelle, you and I.
Oh, I know.
The way that the economy itself is set up is so that you are absolutely enslaved during the day.
Oh, yeah. It's set up to fail. It's set up to fail so they can replace it with whatever new thing that they have.
And even as a family unit, for both parents have to be working, kids have to be in daycare or at school. Everyone has to be in their little programmable spot during the day. They come home and we're trying to get our kids fed and done, all that stuff. There's just no energy left sometimes for people to do the external work. And that's why I think it's so important for everyone to just, whatever you can do during a day, especially if you're just beginning on this path, whatever you can do to carve out 15 minutes. 15 minutes is not a lot of time, 15 minutes. In the morning, at lunchtime, when on your lunch break, wherever it is, to just unplug. That's the number one.
And even if you do it while you're getting a chore done, doing the dishes, doing the laundry, cleaning up something, whatever it is, doing something that you have to do where you're doing something with your hands and you're taking your mind out of it.
Well, because we think we can do 2 or 3 things at a time, because that way we get more done, because we've been programmed into this. Get done in a day thing. But then what happens is our energy is always scattered. We are never whole, united, at one with ourselves. And when you're not a solid beacon of energy yourself, you're just feed for everything else. You're the munchies for all the other energies to munch on. And you end up
because you're giving that energy away.
Giving it away. You have little holes in your energy system where they get in and suck away. So I would say just 15 minutes, or like you said, a chore while you're loading the dishwasher. Just load the dishwasher. It's hard. I'll admit, it's hard for me because I'm oh, I'm going to finish that podcast I was listening to earlier. Here we are talking to my guest. Or, there's that other thing I was going to listen to and I didn't get a chance to, and it's only 9 minutes long. I could probably do that while I'm taking him out for his potty break. And then if I don't do that, if I just decide to just be quiet, I'll walk the dog and I'm wow, the trees are covered in the most beautiful, crystally frost right now. And the berries look so pretty. And I just soften. My whole body softens. And I'm connected with life. I'm connected with personality and life and the elements of water and earth. And in those tiny moments is where it can happen. It doesn't have to be quit your job, stay home and sit in lotus position all day, or have a 2-hour-long yoga practice.
And even just to step outside when the sun is out. And sometimes I do this, especially when I take my dog out. But even if you just step out for 2 minutes and gaze at the sun, there is something to be said just about gazing at the sun with your eyes closed, of course, that just brings in some vitamin D and it'll just refresh you. And I also wanted to say that I think sometimes the thing that we aren't realizing and that people really aren't talking about is that as we're losing this ability to critically think and connect with ourselves and accept the programming and give away our own energy, it's just like anything else. You don't use a muscle, that muscle atrophies. We're atrophying as a collective our critical thinking ability because we've been so programmed, and it's just shutting down. So we need to open that up as an entire humanity. We're losing it. Just like, when you take a pill and the pill does the function for you. If you stop taking that pill, that organ no longer functions, or that action in your body no longer functions. So I think there's something to be said about that. It is like a muscle. And I think so much of it, with the distraction and with the programming, with all the stuff that's being shoved down our throats and into our minds, it's more being shoved into our minds, and then it comes out our throats. But yeah, we're losing that ability quickly. And I hate to say it, but like, look at the education system. They're not teaching kids to critically think. It's so different than it was for me. I will never forget when my kids had the math stuff, and I'm like, what? Like, it was so confusing to me. Like, there's more than one way to do it. This isn't the only way, and this way doesn't even make sense to begin with. So it's like, no, it has to be this. I remember I would get in arguments with my kids, and they'd be like, no, it has to be done this way, and I have to show that. And then they get frustrated and go away, and they're like, you're not helpful. And I'm like, but like, there's more than one way, and you have to know that there's more than one way to solve a problem.
Yeah. Well, and when you're talking about this, I keep seeing, I remember one time I had a past life regression, and I saw myself in Atlantis, and I saw myself dying in Atlantis. And it was like, I was like drowning underwater, and like, it was this beautiful blue, but I could remember how I felt. And I was looking back at that lifetime and that society as it crumbled. And I was so sad because we had let technology take over. That's all I remembered. I was like, we lost spirit. We lost spirit. We became technology centered. And that was 10 years ago, before technology even became this big of a BlackBerry at the time or something. It was before all of this stuff happened. So
now AI is going crazy.
Yeah, when I had that regression, it didn't even like make sense to me necessarily. But now that I see what has happened, even in the last like 5 to 6 years, in terms of technology and the younger generations having it in their hands and on their watches, and pretty soon it'll be on people's skin, and the technology that's coming is scary. The new Apple, out with all the AR, VR type of stuff, and
well, even just chat. I think some people don't understand. Do you not think ChatGPT or whatever it is, and all these other things, like somebody's programming that?
Yeah, well,
like if you type in a question, it's coming from somewhere. And it's probably not the person with humanity or your best interest at heart.
the magnitude of that, when you ask a question and there's an answer that comes to the mass public from God knows where, I mean, that right there is the beginning of a disastrous amount of programming.
And like you said, from God knows where, it's not coming from God or source or the universe.
But that's why it's so important to develop that quiet, that internal gaze, like learning is like more important than anything ever, is knowing that like it's not out there anywhere. The questions and answers are not on ChatGPT or YouTube or anywhere else. They're within you. And that process of going within and learning how to do that, how to know thyself and create discernment, like learn what discernment feels like in your body. What does feel true to you? What lands falsehood? Where can you feel that something is not quite measuring up when you hear it? Sometimes I'll hear somebody talk. I was listening to, I'm not going to drop a name because I don't want to say anything mean, but there was somebody on a podcast yesterday, and he's like a famous person on like Gaia TV and stuff. And he was having a podcast interview, and he was talking about all the things he always talks about, which all sounded like up here, like they're very much like spiritually up here. And then he said the F word regarding sexual behavior. And I felt his energy dove. It like took a nosedive. And I was like, whoa, that was not in alignment with anything. And then he said it again a little while later, and the same thing happened. He's talking, drops that word. And I was like, I could feel this. This
you can.
Happen. And I was like, whoa, that's remarkable how I can feel that in my body as he's speaking. And of course, no one called him out on it or anything like that. But having that sensation in our bodies, like knowing how to create that, how to, it's not even create it because it's already in us, right, Michelle? Like
it's our gut, like we were just talking about. How does that react with your gut? What does your gut say about that?
Yeah, it's just connecting back with our ability to do these things. And same thing with like being open to channeling or being psychic or having intuitive senses. We're taught that we have five senses. We do not have five senses. We have a bazillion senses. It's just that we've only been told to turn those five on, and the rest of them we've actually kind of been told to shut down because otherwise you're nuts. If I tell people I'm psychic, they like, what the heck? So instead I use the word intuitive, and I get messages. I sort of soften it, but truly we're all psychic.
Yeah.
We have psychic abilities. That's how we're built as beings. So learning how to bring those gifts and those senses back on board, to pull them back into us and to reclaim who we truly are. And again, that's like what I told when I was channeling that book is this is who you really are.
Yeah. And I think that's the core of it. What you just said right there is to reclaim who we are.
You can just end it right there. Reclaim who you are.
Yeah, just reclaim. I don't know. Figure it out. We won't tell you the how. No, we will. That's why we're here. We're here to help everybody with the how. And again, it goes back to my reclaiming who I am doesn't look the same way as you reclaiming who you are. So it is an individual path. And I think it's just further emphasizing how important it is to go inside, because reclaiming yourself looks different for everyone. So how does reclaiming yourself look for you? Maybe it's getting rid of some of the toxic people in your life, some of the toxic food, some of your toxic habits. I mean, it's so individual. And it's like you said, with the patches that I use with the phototherapy X39 patches, I can put a patch on myself and put a patch on you. Our results aren't going to be the same because your body is different than my body, and it's going to heal my body in a different way that it's going to heal your body, because my issues aren't your issues. Some of them overlap for sure, but we do have to go inside to uncover and to reclaim who we are. I love that.
I've actually struggled with that too, even as a coach, because I'm back up because the sun is starting to hit me. Because everyone's like, oh, you have to have packages for people, like programs. And I'm like, I can't just design a program that's going to work for the masses. Other people might be able to do that. I can't do it. I am an individual, case by case person. Like, I will sit with somebody, listen and sense into what's going on. And it is so personal. It is such an intimate experience that, like, I can't fathom just saying, here's my program. And it'll work for you. It's not the same as like, this is how you do your taxes, or this is how you bake a chocolate. It's very different.
It's the more like the overview. It's like, here's the what to do. If you want to get into the how and the individualness of it, I don't see any better way than working with someone like yourself or whoever that you find, because it will dig up the things that you and your subconscious are not willing to look at yet. But it's funny how when you work on that level, it's funny how they come up.
Yeah. I had a session with my person today, and I just leave every session and I'm just like, God, you are good. You are amazing. The synchronicities of the things that have happened in my week, how they pop up in a session with her when she has no idea these things have popped up for me this week. And then afterwards I start telling her about this, and it's just amazing. Like, we're amazing. Like, God has made us amazing, and it is well worth clearing away any of this like 3D stuff that we need to in order to find the truth of who we really are, and then find a way to weave that back into the 3D. So always bringing that heaven down to earth, like weaving the two together, because we can't just leave the earth and bolt out to the ethereal. We still have to be still committed to being here on this planet. So how do we bring heaven down to earth?
Well, and I think it goes back to the masculine and feminine that we were talking about. So we individually are here to balance our masculine and our feminine side, but the earth is here to balance its masculine and feminine, the institutions, the this, the that. So it's not just us that are trying to balance the masculine and the feminine. It's everything's trying to bring that into balance. And think about all these things, trying to bring all these things into balance. I always say Mother Nature will always win, because I do believe that. But ultimately, if Mother Nature gets too far out of balance at the sacrifice of us or anything else, it will bring itself back into balance to survive. And we're supposed to be co-creating with our earth. I mean, as we elevate ourselves, the earth elevates, everything elevates, the collective, our own spirituality, just everything. The beauty becomes so much more evident in the everyday little things. And we all heal. The earth heals, we heal.
I had this beautiful experience one time, and again, I was working with the woman who does healing work with me, and we had gone into this like shamanic space, and there was a circle of like elders who are all women, like grandmotherly beings, grandmotherly. They were human beings, like they were um, not just Native American. They were like all different ethnicities, but sitting around a big fire and singing. And we had all of this healing work happen, and all of this energy rose up from where they were singing. And it ended up that like I was rising up with the energy. It turned into like a condor or an eagle or some massive bird that I was riding on the back of. And it just took me over the land. And as it took me over the land, the colors all changed from being the colors that we see to this like technicolor. Like everything, every color had like dimension to it. It was like going through this Candyland type of space where the trees and the water and the clouds and the flowers and the birds, everything had so much color and dimension to it. And there was this vibration. It was like a song that was being sung by all the tribes of people around the whole world. Like every human was emitting this hum, this beautiful sound of harmony. And it was literally showing me how it would look and feel to be on a planet that was in harmony. And I was just, I mean, I had tears
Yeah.
just like, I mean, 5 straight minutes of bawling my eyes out, the beauty. But ever since I saw that, I was like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. If I was, I know it's possible. It might take a few more lifetimes, but it's gonna happen.
I
Darn it! I
agree.
need to do my part, and my part means working on me and helping people if I can. But if we just do our part, like we're getting there. That's all we can do, really, is clear, and radiate.
Yeah, and elevate. No, I completely agree with that. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So how do people start? First of all, let's talk about your book, and how do people get that?
So Elevate is available wherever books are sold. So you can go on like the Google Shop thing and type it in. It'll give you options: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you're in the Lehigh Valley, I have books, and they did have some at the End Bookshop on Tillman Street, but I think that they might be out of them.
Oh,
Um,
well, that's a good thing.
it'd be awesome if after people read it, they would go back on and do like just a quick little review. The way that all these algorithms work is, if you review it, it gets bumped up and then gets exposed to more people. Great, I appreciate that. That's where the book is sold. And then working with me, I have a website. You can find everything on my website that you need. It's just elevationnation.com, and it's spelled ELOVEATION, Elevation.
Yeah, just keep in mind the love in there. And if you missed that, everything will be in the description here. So don't worry about it. I will have everything for you. Well, I would love to hear what you have as parting words of wisdom to everyone listening on their own awakening journey.
I mean, I think know thyself is the most important thing. Like the focus needs to be internal. Like know thyself no matter what's happening out there. It's got something to do with what's in there. So know
Mm.
thyself. And I like to tell my clients too that very often it's about subtraction. Our world is about adding all the time. Like, what can we gain and add to ourselves? Like, the more you can subtract out of your day,
I
your
love
life,
that.
space there is for God, the divine, to be around us. So I think those are like my two favorite, like super simplified things to remember: know thyself and subtract. They're super helpful.
That makes so much sense. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that. Well, I appreciate so much of your time. There's so many more topics that we could get into. So I would love to have you. So
Find
many
us
topics.
at each other.
They're all rattling around in there.
We met each other across the table. We literally sat across the table from each other, and we were like, "Oh,
I know. And it was like, I felt like we were in a bubble. I was like,
it's
okay, nobody else is here, right? Because there's a glass bubble around us and no one else is really listening, or most of them didn't understand what we were talking about. We were just like, so yeah. And I got your book that day and I read it pretty quick because it's like a quick read, but a profound read. And
yeah, it's
especially if whether this journey's new to you or you're still on it, because I'm a firm believer that the more we learn, sometimes the more we forget the basics. So there's never, there's always time to go back to where we started.
I reread a lot because, again, sometimes you'll
Wow.
read something at one part of your life and it'll make sense in one way. And then
Mhm.
if you go back and revisit it, it'll often fit in it in a different way.
So
Or there's
true.
it's the first time that'll make sense again. So I read I reread books a lot for that reason, or re-listen to them a lot.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and
I agree.
it's like it's not a very thick book. It's not a very long book.
Yeah.
And again, I would go back when I was writing it, and I would try to add to it, and I would get absolute no's. Like I was like, I can't. Like,
Mm.
I'm not allowed to say anything more about this because it's
Yeah.
meant to be. And I
Yeah.
think that's
And it's an easier read. It's more like you're not going to read it and be like, I don't understand what she's saying. This doesn't make sense. Like it's an easy read, I should say.
yep. It's like a conversation. It's like someone just
Yeah.
talking. So it's very just like, normal language. There's no terminology or anything like that. But succinct. And, I
Mhm.
hesitated to publish this book for, I think it was 4 years
Wow.
because I thought it was too, and I was like, no, people aren't going to want to read something that's that brief. And then I started talking to my daughters who are all teenagers, and we were joking about how our attention span is so short. Like even on Instagram, if there's somebody who
Mhm.
wrote a whole, like, nope, can't do it right now. And I scroll past it to something shorter. And so we had this conversation around the dinner table one day, and I was like, wow, you're right. Our brains have changed. Like people don't want to necessarily always read something long and heavy. Again, we're
Yeah.
saturated. So it's a nice, easy read.
Yeah. Our
Um,
burnout rate's much quicker for sure.
Mine too. I'm guilty. See?
I agree. But definitely we will have you back. And for everybody else, make sure that you check out all the details, get your copy of Elevate. And until next time, this is Michelle with The Wealth Within Us.
Thank you.
Thank you.